This is the Mind Body Detox Podcast, where we discuss all things integrative health and wellness, interviewing folks from all over the world, sharing insights and wisdom for how to live a healthier life in mind, body, and spirit. Welcome back, everyone, to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. I'm your host, Mind Body Medium Kara Lovehart, and we're going to be bringing back Pat Dumas onto our show today. So if you have not listened to our previous episodes with Pat, she is an intuitive reader and teacher, and she uses several modalities in her work, including astrology and the tarot. And Pat's been reading for over 55 years. She has been a professional astrologer since 2008, and she trained with the PA School of Spiritual Healing and Reverend Bill Trivet. She has also studied astrology with Stephen Forrest and Astrologos, which includes Dr. Bernadette Brady and Darylyn Gunsberg. So today we're going to talk more about astrology in general and some really deep dive questions we want to really ask her with her extensive experience and background. So let's bring Pat on the show. Hi, Pat.
How are you? I'm doing well. How are you, Kara?
I'm wonderful. I am really excited to go over these questions. I know I thought really long and hard about the questions I wanted to ask you because we're going a little bit deeper than we did before. So let's start out with your journey with astrology. Like, what initially drew you into the practice and how has it transformed your life?
It's really interesting. I don't know that I've got an actual inception point for having fallen in love with astrology. I started reading tarot when I was very young, when I was 12. That's why 55 years. I'm an old lady now, but I was also interested in all of the other ways that metaphysics could manifest themselves. And I started to become interested in astrology. As a matter of fact, I can remember the very first book I had was, it was a little orangey pink kind of paperback, How to Cast Your Chart. I can't for the life of me remember the name of the author, but I remember getting so confused. I remember looking at all of this information. I must have been 14, 15 years old. And I remember thinking, this sounds like it could be really interesting, but I just can't wrap my head around this. So I shelved it for a while. Then when I got into my 20s, I started doing a little bit more studying and a little bit more reading. And while I could now wrap my head around the concepts, what I ran up against, and I don't know if you've ever noticed this, is that there's so many different sources. They started arguing with each other. They started, being at odds with each other. And it meant that I was once again confused and didn't know how to wrap my head around the process. I kept getting books, I kept reading, but it wasn't until I moved to South Central PA that I could find a teacher. I used to live, in the boondocks of northern New York State. We were 45 minutes south of Montreal, Canada. So it was, when my daughter went to college and they asked her, what do you do in Chazy, which is the name of the town we lived in, for fun on weekends? She says, cow tipping. That gives you an idea how isolated this place is. And it's not like I could, put my hands on a teacher very easily in rural northern New York State. But when I met Bill Trivet and I started taking classes, it was like a light switch got thrown on. And he looked at my chart and he said, that's because you've done this before. Looking at the chart, he could see I had the typical astrologer's mark, which is Uranus resting in the third house. You speak astrologies. So it was kind of cool. He had it too.
Wow. That's pretty cool. I didn't know that. I'd love that information. Well, I know that, years and years of working with astrology for clients, moving into teaching, you're a natural teacher. I'm wondering, as an astrology instructor, what do you believe is the most important reason for people to learn the art of astrology? And what can it teach us about ourselves and the world? Because like you said, there's so many different resources out there that you could get confused. And, some people maybe say, well, I don't believe in astrology because this one says this. And that question, I don't believe in astrology, is really interesting.
Or that might be the only thing that they've ever been exposed to, are the sun sign columns in the newspaper, which, quite honestly, have their place, but that's not going to tell you about yourself. let's answer the first part of your question as the primary jumping off point. The most important reason to understand, not necessarily be able to read for somebody else, but to understand your own chart, to learn enough astrology to look at your chart and to sort of get to grips with what's going on in there, is that it's your blueprint. It is the perfect way for you to understand yourself. One of the things that I teach my students is that the most important reason for them to be sitting there learning this is that if you don't, you may go through your entire life banging your head against the wall, working the hardest you can to be somebody you aren't. Whereas when you're looking and learning about your own chart, you can very clearly see what you came in to do, where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, and you need to bolster and support. What are your normal responses to different stimulus? And it is absolutely, to me, the most wonderful form of redemption and self-acceptance that I've ever worked with. Once you understand yourself, then you can keep evolving and keep making yourself even better, rather than trying to force a square peg in a round hole, if you get my drift.
And I think that's a beautiful embodiment of my values to embody radical self-love. How can you can't love yourself if you're not being yourself.
If you don't know who you are.
Right.
And this is a fabulous way to jumpstart that. There's a reason Carl Jung used astrology when he worked with his patients. He looked at their charts so he could help them heal faster. I mean, it works. What can I tell you?
And so our podcast we just launched back a couple weeks ago, we have Ali Coker. We talk about, she's a psychotherapist, how she integrates astrology and tarot into her psychotherapy counseling practice. And we talked specifically about Jung. And so that's why I want this episode to go after that. So people who are like, I don't even understand why, that we're diving into this a little bit more. So, well, can you share a story with us where astrology had a profound impact on maybe one of your clients, or helping them gain clarity or insight into their life?
Yes. I have to be really careful. As you know, ethics is really important to me. And in order to protect the innocent, I need to change names. All kidding aside, there are times when we have kept things very close to our chest, baggage that's packed way back in the darkest recesses of the mind. And sometimes astrology can help unlock the doors that keep healing from happening, those doors that are so slammed and locked tight that we can't personally get at them. One example I can give, without, going into great detail, I have to be careful. I could see that because of the planetary array between Mars and Pluto in this young woman's chart, and where it was placed in the chart, the houses that were activated and the other planets that were in connection with it, it was patently obvious this young woman had all of the potential signs of having been either sexually or, if not actually abused, certainly, if not molested, certainly abused, if you know what I mean. Now, I had to be very careful in how I couched that. But just by simply asking the question, have there been times when you felt your body wasn't your own, wasn't treated as sacrosanct as your own? For the first time, she was able to talk about it. It really loosened some floodgates for her. It was really torrential in terms of tears and the things that came afterwards. But she followed up with me and said that it was actually very healing because for the first time it was said out loud.
Yeah.
And it was not permitted to talk about it when she was young.
Yeah.
So if it couldn't be talked about, her reality couldn't be honored. And from what I now know, having worked with her for several years, she's just flown. She has absolutely soared in self-esteem, in her belief in herself, and in advocacy for other young women. So that is probably the most profound that that I think has been really helpful in terms of helping people discover who they are and how to heal themselves. Because that's really, as you know very well, we don't do the healing, they do. All we do is facilitate and make it possible for them to be able to heal. So I'll tell you, I did a lot of Reiki during that session. It was Reiki going on in the background while I was reading her chart.
Yeah, so I think the value so much in self-awareness in general is gaining that sense of who you are, and then that you can grow that self-esteem. And sometimes, a lot of times, I could say sometimes the services that we offer as readers are the doorway for people to actually get involved in knowing themselves, and even maybe getting other help like counseling and things like that if it's necessary. So that's one of the things we both carry such a strong value in ethics and professionalism, and how do we then deliver the message so that they can get the support they need. So yeah, and I think there's so much more that astrology can provide. So since it's a vast field, and there's different types of astrology, what specific branch of astrology do you practice and do you teach?
Oh, my goodness. I practice quite a few branches. I do basically what we do when I have a regular session. I'm looking at somebody's natal chart interpretation. That is standard Western psychological astrology. Okay. I have also, one of my favorite forms of astrology is evolutionary astrology, in which we're looking at the karmic overlays from lifetimes gone before that can show up in the chart, which is it's a lot of fun, and it's a lot of again, very healing, but really fascinating to watch people make the correlations when I'll give them some background of what I see, and they see correlations of it in their daily lives. An example I can give you, it wasn't mine. I'm going to give you one from Stephen, when Stephen Forrest taught his class in Oregon back, oh my goodness, it was 2009, I think. No, 2010. We were sitting there, and he saw in this gentleman's chart how pharmaceuticals or drugs, or in some way, he may have been some kind of a shaman, or definitely utilized psychedelics to be able to help people get into their journeying and into their path work. Turns out that in this lifetime, the guy is this was on the West Coast, obviously, in 2010. The guy was a psychologist who specialized in using psychedelics in his practice under very careful circumstances. So he obviously was reliving this again. What was different was the fact that in the past, Stephen saw, because of the various connections of the planets, that there was probably a religious overtone to it, hence the shaman, or some kind of a high priest that utilized psychedelics. And this man had left the priesthood in this lifetime because he found it too confining and wanted to be of more help to people. So he went back to college and got his degree in psychology.
Wow.
Which I thought was fascinating.
That's amazing. Well, just a little spoiler alert. We're going to have a series of episodes coming up, y'all, about psychedelics in the clinical psychotherapy, psychiatry field, and some other fun topics around that topic. So that's really awesome that came up in 2010. That's awesome. How do the different types of astrology serve unique purposes? So natal astrology, how does that differ than predictive or horary astrology?
Well, natal astrology tells the story of who you are based upon your chart, your birth chart, which is erected based upon your birthplace, birth time, and birth date. Okay. The transits or predictive astrology is taking that initial natal chart, but saying, okay, what's happening now? What's going on with the progress chart, which is simply an easy way to put that is simply it's a form of the chart that's erected by astrologers to determine how far you've evolved since you were born. And then meshing that with the transits, which is another fancy word for simply saying where the planets now, and how are they connecting with your chart. So they work together, all of those, natal and predictive charts. Mundane astrology, which is the study of countries or cities or entities such as businesses. You can look at anything from the point of its inception and see how things are going. Anybody who's watched my annual predictions workshop or lecture that's done on the first Friday of the month, that's mundane astrology that I do there by looking at the way the planets are arrayed and how they interact with the US chart set for July 4th, 1776. I can sort of get an overall theme, an overall feel for how each period from each 3-month period from what we call the ingresses. I know, big long word. You can get an idea of really quite to the point where things are happening. I've been really surprised at how accurate they've been. I mean, you shouldn't say that, right? I've been surprised at how accurate I was. But it's amazing how much, if you follow the technique, you can determine what's upcoming. Other types, horary, as you mentioned, horary astrology is a totally different animal. Totally different animal. You don't use the same kinds of rules for that. It's literally, you ask a question. You have to formulate in your mind, what specifically is this question? Something like, where is Dad's will hidden? Okay. And you can find the answer in a chart. You have to erect the chart for the moment you understood what the question was supposed to be, and you knew what your path was to get there. And it's based on the ruler of the first house, the ruler of the house that is associated with the question. In that case, where is Dad's will? I would say I'd look at the 8th house, because the 8th house looks at inheritance and birth, death, that kind of thing. Dad, I would look at the 4th house as well, the father figure and the mother figure. So, I mean, it's really fascinating. And then there's electional astrology. Electional astrology is, let's say you and your partner want to get married. You want to pick the best possible date. You can look at the way the planets are set up and choose the most auspicious date for being able to have a successful, long, and happy marriage. I used it when I was selling my house, when we left Red Lion back in 2019. I picked the date for it to go on the market, and then I picked the date for, figuring when I'd get the sale. I picked the date for when we went on the market, nailed it. We had our house sold in 10 days. I did the same for our friends who ended up building with us, and they went a little early. They went too early. They weren't quite on time. So they did get two, as a matter of fact, I think they had 2 offers, and both of them fell through because they did it while Mercury was in retrograde.
Wow.
So it makes all kinds of difference. It's fascinating stuff. Then somebody that works with us at Firefly does medical astrology, Jamie Fay. Beautiful work on determining how does the human body align with some of the planets. For example, Aries rules the head, Taurus the throat and neck, genitalia and the elimination system, that's Scorpio, the feet, that's Pisces. So, I mean, and if you're like me with a lot of arthritis that you're dealing with, Saturn has to be looked at. And for me, Saturn's in my 6th house of health, and it's afflicted. it's in rough shape. So consequently, I have a lot of arthritis and a lot of joint issues, but it's fascinating stuff.
I think specifically it's even fascinating to someone if you are on the fence about it and you're like, well, I don't know, like trying it and getting a good astrologer who has a lot of experience and knows their particular type of astrology that they're specializing in. I think that can like really open up this possibility for, oh my gosh, how could they see that in, and it just gives this sort of like awareness of cycles in a way that shows up in patterns in our lives.
Yes, absolutely. Because that's all astrology is. It's the study of cycles, and how, in many cases, when we think of the birth chart, the progressions are like us going up a spiral staircase. Each of those elements, each of those energies that the planets represent, rising with us as we learn and grow. Or at least that's the goal. That's what they should be doing. Absolutely.
So what about the unique or lesser known ways people can use astrology? I mean, we talked about the horary astrology. Is there anything else just like that are unique forms that people have like, I've never heard of that, because I've never heard of the horary astrology.
It's not practiced as much anymore, which is really kind of sad. One of the things I wanted to do when I retired was actually get into a deep study of it. I haven't had 2 seconds to do that yet. I would say maybe it's applications rather than unique types of astrology.
Okay.
You might not think about it. Like if you're wanting to open up a business, you'd be really foolish not to get your chart read first and see what the progressions and what the transits are for you, because you want your business to do well. So you want it to start at a time when it's good for you, at a time when it's auspicious in terms of the heavens for the business itself to keep going and go strong. It would be a great idea to utilize astrology when you're trying to choose whether or not you want to hire somebody. If you have access to their birth date and place, not everybody can. That's, it's specialized information. But if you can get a look to see, okay, is this person's personality going to mesh well with the rest of the group? It's not to weed out necessarily, but to say, okay, remember how I said a natal chart will tell you what your strengths and what your weaknesses are. Mm-hmm. When you're hiring somebody, you want to make sure that everybody's strengths are going to work together and that somebody's got the strength that another weakness is shown up. Yeah. You know what I'm trying to say? That can bolster another person's weaknesses. Great time to pick a vacation is to use predictive work too. Another one. Just reminded me. Astrocartography is another really interesting use of astrology, and it actually will show you where in the world it is best for you to go, live, vacation if you want to find a love for your life, if you want to find spiritual awareness, if you want to, if you want to, case in point, if you want to find where you were meant to be, to do your life's work. As I had mentioned to you, I was actually born in Germany. My father was a career military officer, and we moved to Long Island, New York when I was just 6 months old. The day after I was born, he retired, and we were back in the United States. My 3 older brothers, my mom and dad, and I. We lived in New York all my life, either on Long Island or up in northern New York State. When we got the opportunity to move, there was just something telling me that going to this place, this totally unknown South Central Pennsylvania area, I had no idea, but I knew I was supposed to be there. This was before I knew about astrology. Come to find out, York, Pennsylvania runs right through my North Node line, my destiny line. It's where I am meant to be to do my work. So it was, and again, it's nothing I knew ahead. I didn't realize it until afterwards. So it's really, really fascinating stuff.
Yeah. And you know that you read for my astrocartography when I had tremendously transformational experiences in Oahu, Hawaii, that my Neptune line and my Venus line run like almost right through there. And for the people who don't know what the Neptune and Venus represents, it'd be really beautiful for you to kind of cover that. What is that for people who are just to taste?
Well, the Venus line is where are you going to find love? Where are you going to find the things, people, situations you love? Where do you display your most ardent connecting capabilities? Venus is all about how do we network? How do we merge? How do we achieve rapport with others? Neptune is its higher vibration. And it's that concept of where is my spiritual life supposed to go? Where is my creativity? What direction is that supposed to go in? But it can also be, where am I willing to be resting in illusion? Where am I willing to wear my rose-colored glasses? So as if you remember, I had said to you, this is a great place to go for a vacation. It's not a great place for you to live and work on a permanent basis. So,
yeah, absolutely. So how about how do you see astrology in playing a role in helping individuals understand their life purpose?
Oh, it's absolutely fabulous for that. You start out when you're taking a look at your chart. You look at the North Node. What's the sign in the house that it rests in? Because that will give you a clue as to what are the general elements that you're seeking to achieve nirvana, to find your true north. Then you take a look at what sign is resting on the 10th house cusp, because that's your public life. Do those two correspond well with each other? Because we know a lot of people, Kara, you and I both do, who have a job, literally a job, but also have a vocation on the side. And that can be a case where the North Node may not necessarily be at odds, but not comfortably meshing with the sign that rests on the 10th house cusp. The 10th house cusp for me is Aquarius. I'm supposed to be working with technology. I'm supposed to be finding a way to level the playing field. I'm supposed to be very individualized, which makes so much sense to me. That's why I love teaching. It's kind of self-directed. It lets me do it my way, which is it's a very, very Aquarian thing, unfortunately. And my North Node happens to rest in Pisces, which is kind of cool. So I came here to learn how to use technology to find my spiritual meaning. And that is really what I've done by utilizing the software for astrology and the wonderful gifts of Firefly Hollow allowing me to teach tarot and astrology there. We're having a ball by merging those two things, the spiritual and the metaphysical and the amazing with real science when it comes to technology. It's great.
Yeah. And yeah, the technology is definitely not always everyone's like, there's just some people like, I can't do technology. They're just not, I'm not good with it. And I think that'd be curious to see in their chart if there's something that would be lining up for that and sharing.
You probably have something afflicting their Mercury and their Uranus. Yeah. Like a Saturn square or something of that nature.
So as far as astrology intersecting with other spiritual tools, such as the tarot, can you explain maybe how those systems will complement each other? Because Allie does talk about this, that she incorporates these into her psychotherapy sessions. So just from your perspective, curious how they intersect.
I have often thrown cards at the end of a tarot, of an astrology session. Astrology is going to give you the big picture. It's going to give you the rough layout of where the energies may start to present themselves. Tarot can be used to fine tune. It can be used to get more deeply into the whys and wherefores. I especially like to use it when I'm doing predictive work, because the predictive work will give me a rough window of when something is going to occur. As you'll know from our readings in the past, there is a building up period in a transit or a progression, an exact moment when the exact happening, the square, the trine, the sextile. Then there's a waning period. We can use that as a guideline, but tarot I've actually found it to be quite successful to nail down more tightly exactly what the window might be. So that's useful. They have always walked hand in hand. I mean, if you look at the Kabbalah, they are totally intertwined. Astrology and tarot totally go hand in hand in the Tree of Life. There is, in my class that I teach in Tarot 365, we devote one class to how the two correspond with each other. And I show people how to lay out their chart in cards, because each of the cards, it corresponds to a decanate, a 10-degree period of each planet at each sign. So it's fascinating to watch your chart laid out in tarot cards and see how accurate it is.
For those who don't know what Kabbalah is there any way you could just briefly share what that is?
Oh my goodness. That's where you need Maddie. The Kabbalah is an ancient Jewish mystic tool that is so deep you can't even begin to scratch the surface. There are Jewish scholars who have spent lifetimes just scratching the surface of understanding the Kabbalah. I wouldn't even begin to presume. But it basically offers it can be a wonderful tool for manifestation. It can be an amazing tool for meditation and for I don't know. For literally traveling within your own mind to different areas of your psyche, I think is a neat way to put it. By thinking about each of the different sephiro, each of the different circles.
Yeah, Matt definitely has a lot of knowledge on it, and he talks to me, and then my eyes glaze over. And I'm usually someone that dives in, and I really I grasp quite a lot of metaphysical topics, but that one I'm just like, I don't understand. So yeah.
I was just going to say that you almost have to suspend your knowledge of time and space when you're studying the Kabbalah, because it will take on a life of its own. That sounds very woo-woo, but it is, quite honestly, deeply woo-woo, but also deeply accessible if you know the key, if you have the key to unlock it. I would love to take another course. I took a very introductory course with Bill years ago on the Kabbalah, and we sort of, the class kind of exploded because of some personality stuff that were going on with a couple of the people that were there. So Bill and I we were trying to get another one started, but it just didn't seem to happen. That's something Matt should be doing. He should be teaching.
It's coming up. It's actually coming. He's in the new year. He's ready to teach that stuff. So do you find astrology can enhance other healing practices like energy work or meditation?
I have had astrology help me with meditation in the sense that I can use the symbols of the planets if I want to access a certain energy within myself. When I was still working as a proposal coordinator for an engineering firm in Baltimore, interpersonal communications can be challenging, especially when you're dealing with a very establishment-oriented kind of business like engineering, a very male-oriented business like engineering. And I was having, at that time, some really difficult meeting of the minds with this one guy. So I literally spent about 20 minutes meditating on the concepts of the circle, which is the idea of wholeness. You know, in astrology, or in esoteric language, the dot represents the beginning. A circle is a bunch of dots that all meet to each other. And then the cross talks about the material world. And if you think about the original, I'm going to show you this. I'll hold it up to the camera. This is what the original Mars glyph was. The cross on top of a circle. So the concept was using the material to conquer one's spirituality, which is interesting. If you note, if you invert that and do it like that, you have the Venus symbol. She is all-knowing and receiving the material. So having those two concepts, meditating, I was able to try to blunt a little bit of my anger with this individual and try to meet him where he was, from the standpoint of him not being used to a strong woman. I played a little bit of the game. I used I won't say my feminine wiles, I don't have any of those, but I used more of the receptivity of Venus in conversations with him. I blunted my natural, aggressive, Mars-oriented kind of speech patterns to allow him to feel less threatened. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I know that's how it worked for me.
Well, I think I can give an example as far as the tarot, as far as meditating on a particular card. We're not talking about astrology here, but I definitely made friends with Saturn, so to speak. So what that would be, if someone doesn't understand that, discipline, having, time orientation and structures, and maybe taking the structures to order, and being a medium and being like a person that lives in a space of no time and, present moment operation. When you do readings and information comes in is scattered, not oriented to time and space. It's like playing charades with like a non-embodied person.
Oh my God, that's a perfect way to describe it. That is exactly right. Because when I get information, it's shown to me in images. And it's like, what?
Yeah. And why do you think so many mediums and intuitive readers come off as scatterbrained? Because that's the type of non-linear fashion in which the intuitive and creative mind, even that part, that operation of the brain works, the mechanism. But I've used astrology as meditation on, I need to get very organized, very structured here so that I can create a solid container to actually bring in all this information. I want details. For the medical astrology too, I want details. So you can't get details when you're nebulous, when you're kind of, well, yep. And I think using Saturn as a meditation tool and the Emperor in Tarot.
Right. You have to have a matrix in which to build. Exactly.
All right. So the next question I have, do you have any fascinating stories or case studies where astrology provided unexpected or life-changing insights for a client or student? I know you already shared one, but do you have any others that you want to share?
Yes, actually, I was just thinking of one. There was a young woman who she's she's one of us. She's a healer, but she's also quite a talented physician. She's a doctor. And she wanted to open up a new business. She wanted to open up the sort of a way to mesh both sides of the coin. And I have this feeling, Pat, it's supposed to be this year. And everything I was looking at was saying, not this year. Don't do it this year. And she didn't. Or, excuse me, she did. She tried to open it despite my suggestion. And she did open it. And it went belly up because the building that she bought ended up having like some kind of a lien on it. And it was a mess in the courts. She lost everything. So, yeah. So her impulse was right. She wanted to build this, and she could, but the time she wanted to do it was not going to bode well. So, yeah, that was one case where it was pretty profound and pretty impressive. She came back to me, she says, if you say no, I won't do it again.
Yeah, that's a lot. I mean, the unexpected life-changing event insight that I got was told to me by my color puncture instructor when we were going and finishing our training, and we were doing medical astrology based things. And she said, hey, you have a Pluto moon conjunction happening. It's in your 8th house. It doesn't happen that often to people. And then I came to you. But she said to me, go get checked. Like, go get checked by your OBGYN. I had a cyst the size of a lime on my ovary. So we had to get my left ovary removed within a couple months. And that was sudden. And you were like, yep, that's pretty much what we'd see in the chart. And yeah, so that was pretty profound.
Yep. For those who don't know, Pluto is very associated with the 8th house. It rules Scorpio, but it also rules the reproductive system. So that makes absolute sense. 8th house is surgery very often. I have surgery coming up myself, so I'm looking. My doctor only does surgeries on a certain day, so I'm like, okay, this is your window. Which day are you going to pick? Yeah. Yep, for sure. Yeah. And that's why I love the idea that we have somebody like Jamie Faye nearby, because that's not work I do. It's not my gift. I'm sure if I wanted to and studied hard, I could, but it doesn't come naturally to me as it does to her. So I strongly encourage people who want to get that kind of insight into what might be going on for themselves, especially people who have something like Neptune resting in the 6th house. Neptune is a planet that talks about the vague and confusion and illusion, or things that are hidden. And if it's in the 6th house, this can mean all through your life you have difficulties with illnesses that are really hard to diagnose, really hard to get a handle on. So having somebody like Jamie Faye taking a really good look at the chart can help a lot.
Yeah, and it can, again, we don't diagnose, we stay within our scope, because even as a medical intuitive, I share this, but it helps to give you more insight so that you can then go to maybe that type of doctor or that specialist or this scan or this arena, this area of the body may be the root cause. And this happens all the time with my readings. So I love the aspect. I'm not a medical astrologer, but I have a little bit of that under my belt from the training, but she's someone that goes deeper into that. So I think it's really, really cool. But there's so many things you can do with astrology, right? So many things.
There is. I mean, there really, really is. You want to know? You wanted to know a unique thing you can do with astrology. People who are writers, and I've done this myself in creative writing. If you want to create a character that's fully believable, create a chart for them. figure out when they would have been born, erect the chart. You have real human, the what I call the push me pull use, the arguments inside yourself, the things that you're good at, the things that you're not. Where do what's your ultimate emotional response? It worked like a charm when I was writing a story with somebody. We together put together this short story, and it was, everybody said, "My God, this character is so believable." I said, "Well, if they had been born, this is what they would have been like." So it was perfect. You can do that also with tarot, but it's even more pointed and to the really hitting the nitty gritty with astrology.
That is very profound, because I can even say, being an actress, running a chart and saying, let me just say this person was born in 1986. They were female. This is the day. This is where they're born in the world. Then you not only have a personality template snapshot to say, oh, if you understand the astrologies, okay, but then you can also pull on what type of history they would have had based on that time frame, where they were living, what culture.
How would they respond to this? What was their relationship with their parents? So how did they deal with authority? What was their relationship with their mother? So how do they deal with nurturing? Is this somebody who, keeps everybody at arm's length because it hurt to be loved? It's really powerful stuff. You can have a lot of amazing things can come out of astrology.
Wow. I love that. That is a really unique way to use it. So we touched a little bit on this, but astrology is seen as a tool for self-empowerment. We talked about this in our last episode we did, that tarot and astrology used for self-empowerment. And so how can our listeners use their birth charts or astrological transits to empower themselves in difficult times?
Well, that's a good question. Well, just a natal chart, it can give you the permission to be who you are. For example, let's say I'm looking at a chart, and one thing you can look at without having any knowledge of what's going on is on that circle, are a lot of the planets located in the lower part, are a lot located in the upper part, on the left side, on the right side. That's going to give you an idea of how somebody responds. People with a whole lot of planets in the lower hemisphere of the chart are private people. They need time to process. They take in information and they have to be able to withdraw, process, then come back and share their point of view. I can't tell you how many times I've had people with lower hemisphere heavy charts have parents that push them too hard to be somebody they weren't. I said, you have absolute permission to tell somebody to go pound salt if they can't wait for you to make a decision. You are wired in such a way that you need to step back and look at the whole picture. And if others don't like that, too bad. Let's say all of your planets are resting over on the right-hand side of the chart. That's very much a case of someone who rarely gets the chance to call their own shots. It's somebody whose chart is mostly Western oriented. I know it's opposite from what you would think, but in a chart, the left-hand side of the chart is the east, the right-hand side of the chart is the west. People with a strong Western side generally have to deal with the slings and arrows of outrageous fortune, shall we say. They have to ride on the wave of what other people's actions prompt, and then they have to respond. They are far more reactive than proactive. Those with many planets on the eastern side, the left, much more call the shots in their own lives, very much more are able to be a lot more impulsive in a positive way, a lot more proactive. And as I mentioned, the last one that I haven't mentioned is the upper chart. These are the people, and I know you've probably met some. They have no choice. They have to live their life right out in the open. They have their best glories in the open. They make their biggest mistakes out in the open. And
that's me.
And it's something that can be very hard to deal with if, you would just for once love to be able to make a mistake and not have the whole world see it.
Yes.
So learning how to deal with that is an interesting journey, but giving yourself permission then is 2/3 of the battle. This is what you were wired to be. And we need you. We need every energy on this planet. We need them for whatever reason.
Now, if someone, I'm just going to kind of backpedal here for a second. If someone's not seen a birth chart and they don't know what you mean by a birth chart, you're thinking a doctor who has your medical records and they're just like writing, what does a chart look like? For me, if I were to explain someone what it looks like a circle that's divided into 12 pieces of a pie,
Exactly.
like a pie, and it has astrological points and symbols all over around, and then it shows angles in which these points have connected to each other, and it kind of looks like it looks very beautiful as far as art, I think.
I agree.
All right, so if someone's really new to astrology, what is a good starting point for them to begin learning and applying it to their lives?
Take my class. All kidding aside, I would say read the book The Inner Sky by Stephen Forrest. He approaches astrology from an incredibly spiritual standpoint. He doesn't just tell you, yeah, you've got this weakness in your chart. He also tells you how to work with it, how to build from it. I used to, when I taught a regular Astro 101, where you're literally learning how to cast your own chart, the whole 9 yards, I used Stephen's books as textbooks. But it's a wonderful starting place. He writes in a very accessible way. And he's filled with humor, and he's a wonderful Capricorn. He reminds me a lot of Bill. They're both good, strong Capricorns. So I would say start with that. Then take a look at your chart, and you can generate them for free online in a number of different places. One of them is www.astro.com. And if you look through that website, you'll see the opportunity to be able to cast your own chart. And you can look at I call them the cookbook kinds of references where, okay, I have Mars in Aries, so I'd look up what Mars in Aries means. The difficulty with that is that you're getting a very splintered view. When I teach, I like my students to integrate everything together. Very few people have what's called an unaspected planet. An unaspected planet means it's literally sitting there in whatever sign it's in, and it doesn't connect with any other planet in the chart. That's rare. And even if it is in another area, even if it's not touching another planet, it's in a house. Some houses are comfortable for some planets. Some houses aren't. Mars in the 7th house of marriage and committed relationship, that can be a challenge because Mars is all me, self. And if you put that into the 7th house, you can imagine the kind of relationship issues that particular person may be having. So it's hard to say. I would definitely start with reading Stephen's book because it really is outstanding.
So if you want to share, there's two more questions here. I think we talked about this in the last episode, but I want to touch on it again. The myth or misconception that people have that you'd like to clear up about anything about astrology, maybe about Mercury retrograde, about all this stuff that you're seeing as astrology becomes more pop culture. What are the things you're like, oh my gosh, this is such a myth, this is such a misconception. Please stop repeating this to everyone.
I would say stop thinking that having squares in your chart means you're afflicted. Let me put that now into English, now that I've said that in astrologies. There are aspects in the chart that can be challenging, but only in the sense that they make you work a little harder. The 90-degree angle is called a square. It's when a planet is literally 90 degrees away from another planet. Where some people would freak out, oh my God, there's so many squares in this chart. I look at that and say, my goodness, look at all of the energy in that chart. Look at all of the things this person has had to overcome, compensate for, figure out in order to just keep on living and being successful. Squares are what get us out of bed in the morning. Squares are what give us the motivation and drive to succeed. If you want to know what it's like to have too many triangles, 120-degree angles, which everybody, oh, that's so beautiful. It's a gift. Most con men and criminals have a lot of easy aspects in their charts because they were able to get away with stuff. Life was so easy, they didn't know what to do when it got hard. So it's really fascinating to let go of the bad. No, Saturn is bad, like you said, make friends with Saturn. Saturn is bad. No, Saturn keeps body and soul together. It's not bad. Squares are bad. No, they're the engines of the chart that keep you moving. Pluto is bad. Well, sometimes Pluto can be challenging, but what it does is gives transformation. It makes the potential for, to give you an idea, the three gods of change, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. Uranus's way to make change in a transit when the Uranus that's floating around up there right now makes connections with your chart. Its method of change is the sudden change, the swift, like a lightning bolt kind of change, out of nowhere kind of thing. Neptune is eroding. And think of the Colorado River going through and creating the Grand Canyon. Pluto is like a nuclear bomb. It will blow apart what's there to make room for what must come. It is ruthless. It can be painful if you fight it. But there is absolutely no doubt that when you are on the other side and you look back and know that you survived, it's like, I'm not the person I was. So I don't think there is anything in astrology that's really bad. I think everything has its season, is the best way to put it.
And I could probably share an example that you could talk on, and I'm happy for you to use my chart as an example. At least in the pattern app, it says I have a Pluto square my moon in Capricorn. And so
Correct.
For me, my themes in my life is feeling either disempowered or feeling empowered. I have a life purpose in my head to find what true power means, not power over people, seeing the misuse of power and authority in our life, that being a trigger for me, but also knowing that that's part of my purpose because we have so much of that in this culture right now. It's a point of energy. You said that square as an energy driving me forward to help people find empowerment within themselves, and especially emotional empowerment because the moon is the emotions. And mine in Saturn, Capricorn, is my moon, is like the structure. How do we create structure and understanding the structure of our emotions, our structure of our psyche, the rules of our psyche? And it's in the 8th house. So it's like the depth and hidden things. So,
well, let's take it one step further. If we're talking about transformation, blowing things apart, you in your lifetime have had to reform your whole concept of what nurturing means, your whole concept of self-acceptance, your concept, what is a woman? I mean, everything has gone through dramatic transformation multiple times and will continue to do so. That's a natal aspect for you. And whenever something in the heavens is going on that kicks off the moon or kicks off Pluto, that's when it will be activated for you.
Yeah. And I really love it. Like, I feel like I'm always, and especially as an Aries who's like, I want adventure. I want new things. It's like, oh, a new challenge. Well, so basically we're saying is like, I'm passionate about personal empowerment. It's why I'm here. What keeps challenging me in my own personal life. But then I, of course, climb to that mountain, climb to the top of that. Oh, yes. Now what's the next?
Refresh my memory. Your moon is in the 8th, so your Pluto's in the 6th?
Yeah, my Pluto's in the late 5th.
Late 5th into the 6th. So the best way for you to utilize that is in a creative function.
Yes, exactly. Creating content, creating stuff for helping people transform, creating programs, creating anything, art, music. That's it. That's it. Yeah.
There's so much. Oh my God, I could talk about this all day.
But can't you see then why, if you know your astrology birth chart, how the self-awareness can, if you're stuck, if you're cycling, if you're looping, and even if you're just going through a transition in your life, like how much it can be supportive. That's why I know, Pat, that there are politicians, many people in the acting and the media performance industry. They use this, but they don't talk about it because, well, I don't want anyone to know that I used an astrologer to pick, that it is a thing. It's been a thing for a long time.
Well, I've forgotten now which millionaire it was that said millionaires don't believe in astrology. Billionaires wouldn't work without one. Isn't that a great quote? I can't remember who that was. I'll have to look it up. I was looking for quotes.
I love that. Wow. Is it true though? This is one more thing I want to clarify because of the myth or misconception. So Bill Trivet, we've mentioned his name multiple times today. And I just want to, for those who are listeners who are not aware, the local metaphysical bookstore who's been almost going on 40 years here in this area, the father of this store who started this education of all these metaphysical topics in this area and who's trained many, many amazing teacher who is now long passed. He used to say that the rich man's and the poor man's chart look the same. So I want to just also bring that up as a myth or misconception that I often see, that people, not only if they're getting involved in it, they might have friends or family that are really into astrology, and then they give their power away to it. Here I am going on my empowerment kick again, my purpose. But they're like, oh, boy, the astrology says this, or the stars say that I can't have this now, or this is going to happen to me, right? There is each chart. It doesn't mean that you're doomed to health issues. It doesn't mean you're doomed to having no money. I'd love for you to clear this up, because I think that is where then people go, I don't even want to get involved with that. I don't want to know about that thing because I have preconceived notion that it's going to tell me that I'm doomed, right?
Well, it's the concept of, it's like a tarot reader. I have had people that wanted to come to me over and over and over and over, and I had to tell them, I'm sorry, I can't do this for you. You are giving away the autonomy that you were born with, that whatever God, creator, spirit, Fred, whatever you want to call it, whatever you consider to be the power greater than yourself gave you as your human right of choice. You're like throwing it away by coming to me on a regular basis. These are tools. That's all they are, to help you better understand what's going on, where your position is, and how you can best maximize the gifts you have and minimize the weaknesses you have. It is not meant to take over your life. It should never be that, ever. So yeah, I would say completely, I agree with that. The chart of the rich man and the chart of the poor man look exactly the same. It's how the individual uses it that makes the difference. This is why you see twins that are different, right? Born within minutes of each other, but each one is going to use that energy in a different way.
Yeah. Yeah.
I love doing the charts of twins. I really do.
Well, as all things with self-development and self-awareness, again, when you have the self-awareness to be fully authentically you and to accept where you are, your challenges, your strengths, you can better play your cards or your life path choices in a way that continues to help you evolve and grow. And I think that is really the answer to, how do you use this in a way that's supporting empowerment?
If you wanted to know what the best way to invest for your future would be, you wouldn't go to the hot dog vendor on the corner. You would go to a financial advisor. If you wanted to know whether or not this lump in your breast was malignant, you wouldn't probably go to your financial advisor. You would go to a doctor who specializes in this. If you wanted to know what your gifts, your strengths, where your natural leanings seem to be, what the best times of the year ahead might be to initiate, what the best times might be to back off and percolate what might already be in play, that's when you talk to your astrologer. And then you make your decisions from there. But they are your decisions. I tell my people, I am not a fortune teller. I got enough trouble figuring out my own life, much less worrying about yours. That is my stock standard phrase. I'm just giving you more information to work with.
Yeah. Well, you just finished out a year of teaching tarot for wonderful, fabulous students. You're now on your second year cohort, and the students love you. You're an amazing teacher. I'll just say that. I took class with you and I was like, I cannot wait till you teach astrology. And so that is what you're embarking on for this next year. So could you share a little bit about what's coming for that course?
Yes, yes, of course. When I originally thought of this, I thought I'd do it along the same lines of Tarot 365, meeting once a month, doing, that kind of thing, having an online component. And then I realized that I'm getting older and I don't have the energy I used to have. So I said, how can I do this that will make it more accessible for people? For the person who maybe just wants to better understand when they hear an astrologer speak or they read something about astrology, rather than getting it to the point where they can go out and hang up their own shingle and be an astrologer, they just maybe want to understand more. So I said, okay, let's do this. Let's call this Astro 101. And the way I've built this is to have 10 or 11, forgive me, I can't recall which, standalone workshops that'll be happening roughly every 3 months. And we'll tackle in order the building blocks of astrology. We'll start with a very, very introductory course on the 26th of this month of October, which is called Human Construction, How to Read Your Astrological Blueprint, because that's what that piece of paper with those squiggly lines and the 12 pieces of pie are. And it doesn't tell you what each thing means. It's just telling me, oh, okay, that circle, that's how the heavens get brought down to earth. Okay, that makes sense. Oh, that squiggle, that circle with the line, that's Mars. Okay, so it's really a very rudimentary, what are you looking at when you get a printout from one of these online places where you can get your own chart. Then what we'll be doing is having a class beginning in December. December 8th is our first class. It's on the signs, because I start with the archetypes, really, that are connected to the astrological signs, using the solar myths, the sun myths that are connected, looking at what the tribal development of signs are. It's an interesting way to think about it. And each course, as it builds, is going to have an accompanying workbook. By the end of all of the courses, you don't have to take them all. You don't have to take all of them. But if you did, you would have a complete first year workbook on the building blocks of astrology, from the signs to the houses to the planets themselves, the luminaries, the sun and the moon, the inner planets, Mercury, Mars, and Venus, Mercury, Venus, and Mars, the interpersonal planets, Jupiter and Saturn, the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, the aspects, those diagonals that you see, the red and blue lines that are showing up all over the place. And then we would also do, the final class is called Putting It All Together. All right, so what does all of this mean when it's on a page? And obviously it'll be on a very rudimentary level, but it's, I think, going to be something that anyone could start with. They don't have to feel like they've got their college degree, in astrophysics or astrological theory or cosmobiology. Then after that, if I'm still kicking, because I'll be close to 70 by the time we're done with that, I'd like to do some more workshops, one on karmic astrology, on evolution, and how your past lives show up in the chart. I'd love to do one on synastry, relationship astrology. I would love to do one on predictive work, how to do progressions, how to look at the transits. I would love to do one on children's charts. What does it mean to look at a child's chart? It's such a responsibility when a parent comes to an astrologer to say, what do you see for my child? Because really that child's chart is 100% potential. It's, you don't want a parent to assume just because this child's got a very strong fifth house, Neptune in the fifth house could mean a brilliant magician. It could mean a wonderful pianist. It could mean a great dancer. It could also mean someone who lies for a living. So you have to be really careful. So it's fascinating. I'm sorry, you get me on a subject. And I'd also love to do one on cartography, astrocartography, because I think that would be a lot of fun.
That's awesome.
On the where of astrology. I'll be 75 by the time I'm done. Will you still want me at Firefly?
Oh yeah, of course. And then of course these classes are going to be this is your legacy, Pat. These will be evergreen courses that people can take at any time. And I'm really excited
And
for that.
you want to laugh? That is what's going on in my chart right now. I'm in that phase of my life astrologically where I'm being pushed from within. That's what progressions are. Those urges we feel from within to share everything that I've learned before my time is done. So I'm living my chart.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, is there anything else you want to share about your upcoming classes, about astrology? Any last final words for our listeners?
I would say if you're afraid of it, embrace it. If you are excited by it, embrace it. If you are curious about it, embrace it. Astrology is such an incredible tool. I mean, just as an example, watching how Matt shifted from an unbeliever to someone who so completely gets it. That Matt Suter, that was an amazing shift. And I loved it because this is a man who thinks philosophically. And watching him put that bent onto his interpretations in astrology, it's exciting to me. I love watching people I trained really work with astrology. I didn't train Matt. I don't mean that. But I'm saying watching people grow in astrology. So embrace it. Have fun with it. Enjoy it. Because it's a wonderful tool.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Pat, as always. I appreciate you so much. And again, maybe we'll have you guys send us a little bit of questions about this. If you have any other things you'd like to ask, we might be able to do some short stuff and talk a little bit more about any particular topics when it comes to astrology with Pat. But other than that, thank you guys as always for listening, and be well until next time, my friends. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Mind Body Detox Podcast. If you loved this podcast, share it with others and leave us a review. Your reviews help us more than you know and supports us continuing to make episodes and being heard from all over the world. You can also follow the link in our show notes to submit a topic that you would like to hear on the show.